Hi, my name is Sylvia Theuri and I'm a curator for 13 Ways of Looking, which is currently on show at the Herbert Gallery. And I'm really excited today to be joined by one of the exhibiting artists, Navi Kaur. Before we get into the questions that I'm going to ask Navi, I'm just going to take some time to introduce her and her practice. So Navi is an artist and arts educator based in Birmingham, and her work is inspired by the lives of her paternal grandparents, Surinder and Karamjit. Navi's work intimately and playfully documents themes of domestic, cultural, and spiritual significance. She traces interpersonal dialogues and daily activity through digital photography, film, and installation, demonstrating the abounding resilience of first-generation immigrants, the wonders of the everyday, and the compelling expressions of the Sikh Dharam. Thus, Navi's artistic process doubles as a method of self-inquiry, facilitating investigations into the physical and intangible dimensions of her cultural heritage. Navi is currently researching and documenting the lives of the South Asian communities who have settled and work in the rural West Midlands for a photographic series commissioned by Grain Projects. She has exhibited her work across the UK and overseas, including Reminders Photography Stronghold, Coventry Biennial, Manchester Contemporary, Recent Activity, Art Gallery, and Gallery Celine. Upcoming shows include a solo exhibition at New Art Exchange and group exhibitions at Grand Union Gallery, 13 Ways of Looking, which is on show at the Herbert Gallery, and Moseley Road, Bath. Navi is also a qualified arts educator, formerly teaching at a Handsworth-based secondary school, and facilitates workshops in artist-led and museum spaces. So welcome, Navi. Really good to have you here. Yeah. So just got a few questions to ask you to help us engage more with your work and your practice. The first question is, what was the last art event you went to that was particularly inspiring?
Thank you. So I've kind of thought about this quite intensely, because I was trying to think about all of the ones really relevant to my practice as well. And generally, when I go to events, I do try to seek out ones that may have more of an influence on what my interests are. So I think last year I went to the Women's Library in Glasgow, and Navi Kaur was having her book launch there for Be Like Teflon. And within this event, Navi had invited artists and writers and contributors that have kind of contributed to the book. And I think it kind of really stuck out because it was a sense of feeling represented by the kind of artists involved, and also just the experience of being amongst quite a diverse audience, that feeling kind of having my Punjabi heritage being celebrated through a shared meal that was kind of catered by a local company, and it just really had this kind of family orientated vibe, which I really appreciate, and I think that's definitely something that kind of seeps through into my work as well. So that's definitely a kind of recent event in the past year or so that's definitely stuck with me.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that with us, Navi. Still kind of thinking along the right lines of memory and looking back. What is your first memory of seeing art?
Quite a nostalgic feeling when I think about this. I remember just being really young and having a kind of colouring book for Christmas, and I think there's a photo of me holding up a colouring book, and then watching things like Pokemon and Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh, and just being really entranced by these animations. And I just remember spending kind of hours drawing these little characters and having a folder full of them, and then taking them to school and having kind of people tell me, oh, it looks really good. And I think that was my kind of first understanding that I was actually good at doing things kind of with my hands and being a little bit kind of practical. So I guess through art and through my education. But yeah.
And what about in terms of seeing art and engaging with art within kind of more formal institutions like galleries and things like that?
Yeah, quite a funny story, because I'm originally from Birmingham as well. I went to a local school, didn't really have the opportunity of visiting many galleries, and I think, you know, when I was kind of a young teen, we didn't really have trips and things like that. And I remember getting to, I think it's kind of year 9 or year 10, when we organised our own work experience. And a lot of my friends at the time were kind of looking into doing placements with retail stores and within restaurants and within primary schools. And I kind of think I knew that I really wanted to pursue this interest that I had in art. And I remember speaking to my art teacher, and they suggested maybe contacting a couple of galleries, and I was 13. But at the time, Icon Gallery were doing a kind of a young person's work experience program. And I remember kind of applying through, writing my email and being this really young kind of, person interested in seeing what the art world looked like outside of school. And went for an interview and took my massive A2 portfolio full of drawings of flowers and things like that. That I was doing at school, and spent 2 weeks with them. And I remember the show actually. I think it may have been on the, I can't remember if it was the first or second floor, but Ruth Claxton had a show there, and people may know Ruth from kind of someone who works within Birmingham, and it's quite a coincidental thing that I was being introduced to this kind of environment, not knowing who this person was, and then later on, kind of as I've grown and understood different communities within Birmingham, have kind of come back to understanding how people progress and move on from all of these things. Yeah,
I think, yeah, it's really good to hear that story, and to kind of think of what you were thinking about at such a young age about just engaging with these institutions, having kind of never been inside one before. So, and kind of seeing how that's obviously shaped the way in which you've moved through the arts education and then into your own practice. So that's really, really fascinating to hear. And moving on to discuss your practice now in a bit more detail. How did the collaboration between yourself and your grandparents come about? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, happy to. So I think kind of whilst I was on my undergrad, doing my degree in Birmingham, I think I was just making work for the sake of making work and not really understanding what I was doing and why I was doing it. And then it kind of got towards my final year, and the work that I was kind of making became more apparent that there was a theme within kind of exploring my identity and kind of what culture meant to me and what religion meant to me. And I know these are kind of used as kind of buzzwords a lot of the time, but this was something that I was kind of challenging, and through spending time with my grandparents and just having conversations with them at their home, it became more and more apparent that there was so much that I didn't know about my upbringing, and being kind of feeling a little displaced through my teen years and not really understanding certain cultural customs and traditions, and kind of going along with them because I was told to. So through conversations that I then began having with my grandparents, that kind of gave me a little bit of a starting point to investigate different themes within my interests, and developed through mainly kind of photographic projects, and then over the time that's developed into kind of documenting in different ways through film and through installation, and creating these immersive spaces. Yeah, I guess coming back to your question, through my kind of later year within my degree, generally through conversations with my grandparents, and that's how they became more and more involved. Yeah.
So it sounds like it was quite like a natural development into working with them, and I guess an opportunity for growth, not just in your practice, but just in terms of like self-growth and understanding of your own culture. And yeah, which is it's quite nice to kind of think about those two journeys kind of moving along simultaneously, actually. Yeah. And again, just talking about your work, you capture everyday private moments with your family. What do you think that means for privacy when we openly share these experiences with the public?
I think personally for myself, I think creating the sense of vulnerability adds a layer of I don't know, kind of, I'm not sure that the word that I'm looking for, but it kind of adds something to the work where it's a kind of a really honest depiction of what my relationship is like with my grandparents, and how we choose to spend our time, and a lot of the time that we do spend together is very kind of warm and intimate and vulnerable. And I think sharing that, whether that's kind of deemed as quite private or deemed as private moments, that's kind of just something that I'm really happy to share with people. There are many instances where I've kind of filmed with my grandparents, or we're having a certain conversation, or I've taken an image and they've asked for that not to be shared, and that's completely fine. So I think what I do choose to share with the public, especially as my practice has grown over the last few years, are definitely slightly more kind of where my grandparents feel more comfortable to share, and other moments are kind of kept between us. So there is a slight kind of layer of privacy, despite the work being very kind of open and honest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense completely. I think kind of interesting just to hear about the way in which the collaboration works with your grandparents. So there's the element of collaborating and working with them to kind of document their day-to-day lived experiences, but simultaneously there's also this negotiation that happens where there's a discussion as to what is okay to share and what isn't. And I think, like you said, as your practice grows and develops, and maybe your work goes to different places, there probably needs to be that continuous discussion around what each person feels comfortable with. So I think it's kind of interesting to kind of hear a little bit more about how you maneuver that, which can be quite complex, and how you kind of decide what is and isn't shared. And I think for my part, I would find it really interesting kind of engaging with your work and kind of having some little bit of insight into that relationship that you have with your grandparents, and so I guess working with them and creating this new work for this exhibition, and that's all happened under very sort of complex and challenging time. So how have you found the process of creating during this time, with the pandemic and, Black Lives Matter protests and just, so many other kind of things happening in the background or in the center whilst you're working? Yeah.
I think, in a word, I think just difficult. I think for many people it had been a really kind of trying and really kind of testing time, especially right at the beginning when lockdown was kind of enforced and we didn't really know all of the kind of things that we do now, and we weren't really given information that a lot of people wanted and the clarity that we needed. Um, so I think I really spent probably, I don't know, a really long time just trying to work through these things and these thoughts that I was having, and how I wanted them to kind of manifest into work. Um, Also, I'm a secondary school teacher, so um, having that um, this new way of teaching, it kind of impacting how we're all working from home and kind of teaching online and things like that. There was just a lot going on. Um, and then, of course, as you mentioned, with protests and kind of activism and all of these really important things that were happening, my kind of I don't know, my not my interest, but um, my kind of don't know, my whole kind of thought process and how I was thinking about where we are, and it was definitely elsewhere, and I was spending a lot more time understanding issues globally, and how that was impacting people and around the world and closely within friends and family. And I spent a lot of time kind of just trying to um, just be more um, mindful of how I was kind of approaching certain situations as well. And then that kind of impacted how I was making work. And I was kind of choosing not to actively and practically um, spend much time doing those things, because I found it really difficult to place my interest on that, where when there were so many other things going on. Um, and then I guess kind of, I don't know, it had been a couple of months, and then different organisations and arts organisations were starting to move to kind of online platforms, and I kind of was approached to do a few different projects with different organisations. So I found it a little bit, it's almost kind of being eased back into something. So not physically going to an event and being in a gallery space or being in an event space, but still having these conversations and being kind of fortunate enough to have people want to listen. Um, yeah, so I think for a couple of months that was actually really nice, kind of getting me back into um, that frame of mind. Um, and then I found myself more and more um, wanting to pick up old projects, and then with rules kind of changing around June time, I was able to then actually spend more time with my grandparents again after having not really seen them for, you know, 3.5 months or something, which was also really difficult, not just professionally with the work, but personally. Um, yeah, so it's just been a really difficult time for a lot of people. So yeah, I'm kind of getting to that space now where I can feel comfortable to explore different ideas that I've been having as well, particularly during this time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good for us to be able to kind of get a bit of insight into how this time has been. I think, like you said, we're still grappling with it. It hasn't gone away, but I think it affects everyone differently and affects every artist practice differently. And I think, that kind of, in the midst of all everything that's happening, I think maybe, finding time to kind of stop and think rather than just keep going, which can be also another way that people might engage with it. I think it's been interesting to hear how you've taken that time out to kind of think through things, and then how that's reflected in the work that you've created for this exhibition. And then sort of leading on to my last question for you is, what would you want the audience to come away with after viewing your work?
I think kind of as this work was made during, within the last kind of 6 months, and during this period of time where we've not really been able to spend much time with family up until recently, and now obviously with things changing quite quickly, I think wanting the audience to maybe really value the times that we do have with our loved ones. That's definitely something that I've reflected on a lot over these past 6 months, and I know that I'm very fortunate to have the relationship that I do with my grandparents, and I think having this perspective of really feeling content with the time that you're able to spend with those that you really care for, and all of the finer things and all of the small details that we kind of often overlook, that particularly for me with my grandparents, which is shown within the film, these really intimate moments that I think really capture what my relationship with my grandparents is, or so I guess wanting people to kind of maybe reflect on that, and I guess just take that feeling of being having that kind of unconditional care and love for people in their lives.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Navi, for giving us a sort of small insight into your work and your practice. And it's been really, really nice to be able to have this time to talk these things through with you. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia.